One of my favourite books is Light, Science and Magic. This is the 5th edition. There is a 6th. But this is, for me, the best book on photography lighting that I've ever found. It's quite thick. It's quite a large book. And it's written by several photographers who've collaborated. And it's written essentially from a studio perspective. But the information in it is so applicable to so many different disciplines that unless you have already mastered lighting, which I certainly haven't, this book should be essential reading. It will absolutely change your photography for the better. Go through it, try the exercises, and your photographs will massively improve. Light, Science and Magic. This is Motion Picture and Video Lighting by Blaine Brown, revised and updated. It is a little bit old now. A lot of the lighting is now done with LEDs, as well as the traditional lights of yore. And for photographers, it's very interesting because the real masters of lighting are those working in Hollywood. It talks about the light sources, the colour, and many different ideas that the average photographer wouldn't be aware of. This is how it's done in Hollywood. They talk about the tools that are used and how to use them, the theory behind it. A bit of it is worth skipping over, but overall, this book, Motion Picture and Video Lighting, as you can see, it's falling apart, I've read it so much, is worth reading. This is Picture This by Molly Bang, and it's about how pictures work. It's mainly for your composition. It's an art theory book. And in it, she speaks through how the elements, the figure and ground, and the shape of the elements in your photograph determine how that picture feels. In a sense, what it means. It's a very good art book. It's very short. And we have quotes such as, "The larger an object is in a picture, the stronger it feels." It deals with the feelings of aesthetics. It's one of the best books on composition. Short. Picture This by Molly Bang. One of the best ways to improve your photography is to study film. And this is a very good introductory text about that. In particular, composition. So it covers many different films, and it covers how and why they're made, and the choices that are made in framing certain scenes in the way that they do. It has numerous examples from classic films, and some of the more modern films as well. So this, The Language of Film, is worth a read. This is The Filmmaker's Eye by Gustavo Mercado. It's Learning and Breaking the Rules of Cinematic Composition. Quite a large book. Not super large in terms of number of pages. More like a textbook, but beautifully written. And full of examples. It talks about film cinematography, why things are done, what they're called, when to use them. It's very useful to think of it as a textbook, to practice the examples within it, and by doing so, you will improve your composition. The Filmmaker's Eye by Gustavo Mercado. A very important book for people photographing people. is The Photographer's Guide to Posing by Lindsay Adler. A very good photographer in her own right. She has collaborated with Rocky Nook to create quite a large textbook all about posing. It's well illustrated. The picture quality is good. It has do's and don'ts, go-to poses, and it's well worth the investment. This is a textbook that you will use a lot. Get hold of it, practice what's in there, and your photography will improve. For your portrait photography, one of the best things you can do is to learn body language. And here, Alan and Barbara Pease have a whole book explaining all the different ways in which people use their bodies to communicate, consciously or unconsciously. And you can use this in your street or portrait photography, especially when you're posing somebody, to take your photography to the next level. So this book about posing, essentially, is masquerading as a book about body language. A fascinating read and very useful. Sacred Geometry by Dr. Stephen Skinner, who's a legitimate magician in the Solomonic tradition and translated many grimoires from the Latin into English. Here he writes about the aesthetics and also about the sacred geometry, the magical numbers, and how they actually apply, the history of them, where we find them in nature, the composition, and improving your pictures, and improving your way of understanding the world, and the beauty of it, and the intricacy of its complexities. This is a highly, highly useful book. It is Sacred Geometry by Dr. Stephen Skinner. You probably know this photograph. It's, I think, Sharbat Gula, an Afghan refugee, photographed by Steve McCurry in 1984 for National Geographic. There she's 12, and there she's a little older. Not actually that much. They had quite a time finding her because of the Afghan niqab, burqa, face covering. This is a small book of some of the best photographs for National Geographic. It's a very good gift for people who like photography. It's got a whole range of very good pictures. Now they're small, which is obviously not ideal, but there's a great range of them and there are some phenomenal pictures in it. And it's just called The Photographs. This book is Stunning Photographs by National Geographic, edited by Annie Griffiths. It's very good. It's very obvious. National Geographic are known for their great photography over the decades that they've been extant. And this picture book is a very good collection of many different styles of photography by Nat Geo photographers, who are among the best in the world. That's one by Annie Griffiths. But there's a whole range of photographers. As you'd expect with a National Geographic book, the replication of the images is done well. It's a nice big book, and there's some interesting text. But above all, it's a collection of good, inspiring photographs. It's a good choice for a coffee table book, full of good examples of, as the title suggests, stunning photographs. Photobox, the Essential Collection, 250 images you need to see, according to Thames and Hudson and their editor. So more than 200 photographers, many of whom are household names, especially among photographers, are collected in this book. Edward Weston, for example, some of the old classics, to some of the more modern, like David LaChapelle. This book is very interesting. One of my particular favourites, and I can't pronounce his name, is Anton Corbijn, who photographed the Depeche Mode quite a lot. If you want a book with plenty of well-selected images to learn from, Photobox, the Essential Collection, is a good way to start. This is Photographers on Photography by Henry Carroll. How the masters see, think and shoot. Big, bold text. Henry Carroll's name fades into the red. You can tell by the red and the big, bold text that he understands marketing. He has created not a huge book, but a good one. He's got photographers that are well-renowned for their skill and vision. He has created a well-produced book with lovely printing. The photographs aren't huge, but they're visible. And he has a great breadth and range of different photographs. It's a well-marketed book written for a mass appeal, but that doesn't make it simplistic. It is worth the money. This is Photographers on Photography by Henry Carroll. This is a brief history of art. It's a very small book, but it's relatively comprehensive. It has such favourites as Lock on the Star by John Constable, not the normal Haywain. And it goes through a lot of art, predominantly Western, but no less a great book for that. And it will inform your own creation, because you have to consume as much as create. You have to have an awareness of the canon. You have to, as Newton said, stand on the shoulders of giants to see further. And so having an awareness of the different artists, not necessarily knowing all of their names and dates, but understanding their images and contemplating them, that will improve your own photography. And this is a good short book to do so. It's also a good gift. A brief history of art. This is a short book of Caravaggio's paintings by Gilles Lambert, printed by Taschen. Caravaggio was a beast. He was briefly a Knight of Malta, like a number of the Iraq War generals, the Queen of England, the head of Blackwater, Eric Prince, and Jimmy Savile, a number of others. And he was used by the church to make a more populist and emotionally charged series of paintings of Christian themes to promote the ideology that they wanted to present. His painting is absolutely beautiful. His use of chiaroscuro, his use of lighting, but not just that. His capturing of expressions, his use of colour, the detail within his paintings, the life in them and the death in them, and the fact that he, like an artist ought not. An artist must not avert his gaze. Well, he doesn't. He stares into horror, and his paintings are remarkable. If you haven't had a look at Caravaggio, I highly recommend him, and this is a good book for it. This is a very good book about the Western ideal of beauty in aesthetics by Umberto Eco, who also wrote Foucault's Pendulum. It was like an advanced version of the Da Vinci Code books. In it, he talks about beauty and quotes on the back John Keats, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know." It's very well illustrated, well printed. This is the softback version. It's not huge, but it's got a whole array of interesting ideas. Umberto Eco is a philosopher as much as an author, and he covers concepts such as the sublime. And so, to understand beauty beyond the cloying, meretricious beauty of the average photograph, you can understand it better by reading this book, Umberto Eco's On Beauty. Here's Ways of Seeing by John Berger. And here's another one. This is a smaller, newer edition. I think they're the same. But it's quite a small book. It's relatively quick to read. And the reproduction of the many, many images is not particularly good. It's black and white. They're small. But you get this book to learn the lessons in it about art theory that are very applicable to your photography. For example, the idea of the viewer and how many paintings were for the viewer as an extant subject within the picture. Also, that generally the poor people in the original paintings were seen to be grinning inanely. There are a number of different things in this book, The Ways of Seeing, that will change how you see the world, especially art, and will improve your own photography. If you haven't read it yet, you definitely should. You might recognise this from pretty much every art photography course that's ever been written. It's Camera Lucida by Barthus, and it talks about photography in a philosophical way. It might not improve your photographs directly, but it's not a very long read. It's quite a dense read, quite complicated, but interesting. It talks about themes of presence and absence. It's illustrated, not profusely, and in black and white, but enough to show the point. It covers quite a bit of the history of photography, but there's enough in there to challenge your ways of thinking about taking pictures, which has become so easy with a camera phone, for example, that it's easy, therefore, to underestimate the power of creating and preserving a visual image. Camera Lucida. It is one of the fundamental texts, and it's worth reading. There's often an inner game to what we do, or don't do, more importantly, and Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art talks about this in a self-help kind of way. It's a short book. It's a easy to read book. It's a sort of book that you can dip in and out of. And it's a book that will help you produce more of your art. Creativity can be quite a personal thing. You're putting yourself on the line. And this book will help you do so more often for better effect. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. This is The Painted Word by Tom Wolfe. And it's, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a polemic, but it is certainly an expose of modern art. Not so deep as to go into Operation Mockingbird and the CIA funding of that art, necessarily, but certainly a look at how such rubbish is valued so highly, and how art is culture. If you ever wondered why modern art is not really artistic, Tom Wolfe will tell you in The Painted Word. Have you heard of Operation Mockingbird? Well, it turns out that naughty CIA throughout the Cold War were using psyops and sponsoring such artists as Pollack or Rothko to create the culture and certainly influence it. This book tells you all about it, what they were up to and why. So if you want to understand those artists that you might be wondering how they got famous and how they got rich, well, it turns out it was courtesy of the American taxpayer. Because photography can be an art form and it can be used to communicate ideas and feelings, and symbols are one of the deepest and most effective way that humans have to communicate their ideas and feelings, a useful book is something like this complete dictionary of symbols in myth, art and literature, edited by Jack Tressida. It's quite a big book. It's not complete. There are some other occult secret symbols, but it's certainly enough. And it covers a great array of different symbols across the Western and Eastern, modern and ancient traditions, arranged alphabetically. It's good to flick through and include in your photography to reference those archetypes that exist in the human consciousness, whether naturally or put there later. This is the complete dictionary of symbols in myth, art and literature, edited by Jack Tressida. This is Masonic and Occult Symbols Illustrated by Dr. Kathy Burns. A fascinating look into the symbols that surround us. I think it was Confucius who said that if you want to understand the world, look at the symbols. This book is a proper collection of all of them, from many different cultures. Absolutely fascinating. And you'll be surprised by how many you find. You can use these in your photography to deepen the meaning. A very good book indeed. This book was written by Manly P. Hall, a very interesting individual, in his early 20s during the Great Depression. It's incredible. It's really encyclopedic. It's a very thick book. This is a reader's edition, which is a lot cheaper than the very, very expensive edition. There has recently been a new released edition, again, a limited edition, and that's very expensive. You could spend more, and I do have other copies of it, but this one is enough. It will give you a flavour of it, and it's essentially the secret teachings of all ages, as it says. So it covers everything from Pythagorean philosophy through the zodiac, through the many different secret societies, and it does so in a very clear and interesting way. If you want to understand how the world works, in a way, the secret teachings of all ages will help you achieve this.